Hi guys, welcome back, and as you can see I'm back in the workshop, and this video is all about panel lines, weathering and shading. And what I'm going to do is try and put some life, as it were, into the surface of the Focke-Wulf 190, the wing mainly, and show some of the techniques. Now, I'm not using a spray gun, I'm not using an airbrush, I'm using brush applied or pencil applied colouring and marking to the wing. Why? Well, because like everything else with this build, whilst I may have the tools to do them, a lot of you may not. So I'm trying to approach this from that standpoint. So very basic tools I will be using, and I'll show those as well. So let's crack on onto the workbench. Well, before I start talking about panel lines and weathering and so on, you'll notice that I've already got or put in place since last time the Luftwaffe crosses. They're painted on, and the reason I've done that is because I can then weather those. If they were just a decal put on there, then they're very difficult to weather, but you can see I've already done some work on this cross. More on that later. How did I make those? Well, I used a paint mask which I cut myself. It's from this paper backed plastic material which I've used in a vinyl cutter. Just try and catch the light on that. You can see there, and you basically have got two masks that you use. Let's get some smaller ones here. You can see here one there. So the first mask goes on so that I can apply the white, and when that's dry put the second mask on top and then paint the black. Having said that, when you are using a mask, or if you're using a mask, when you put the mask on, the first coat of paint shouldn't necessarily be the colour that you want. It should be the underlying colour. So in this case, when I put the mask on, instead of doing the white, first of all, I did the green and the brown around the edges. Why? Because paint can creep underneath the edges of the mask. So if you colour it or paint firstly round the edges the underlying colour, if it does creep underneath, it's not a problem because it's matching the underlying colour. Once that's dry, you can then paint, in this case, the white, which I did around there. Put the top mask on for the black, but again went round that with white first of all, in effect to seal the edge. And once that's dry, then painted black on top, and then peel the whole lot off, and you're left with this. And part of the weathering process, which I'll discuss later, well, in fact, might as well discuss it now, is using sandpaper very lightly and very fine sandpaper, going backwards and forwards across the surface from the front to the back, representing the way in which the airflow would go. And looking across to the white band here, if I just tilt the camera up and zoom in a bit, you can see there where again I've used that same sandpaper movement to wear away the white, so a bit of the undercolour comes through. Okay, going and looking at other parts of the wing, let's just put it into wide angle and move it back. I think I showed this before, where I've got these bits showing here where I've rubbed with the sandpaper, and on the other wing the same thing, and the white, oops, and the white band there on the wing. So that's reducing the colour, it's removing colour to give us some weathering, not just adding it. I'll come back to weathering in a moment. Panel lines we want to put on to represent obviously the panels on the plane. And what I do is whilst this is chopped about a bit, I get a line drawing of the plane, the full size, and replicate those panel lines, or the major panel lines on the wing. So you can see here the panel line going down here and up here, there and there. I'm not representing all of the different panels that go across the wing, but I am emphasizing ones that stick out. And of course with this model it's only got ailerons, hasn't got flaps, so I have to make it look like it's got flaps. So again, you can see here I've got a line there representing where the flaps. Forget all this shading for the moment, I'll deal with that later. But there, deep line. Now one tip here I would say is don't go over the top with the intensity of the panel lines. By that I mean, if I were to employ that size and shade and depth of colour for panel lines right the way over the whole wing, it would become over the top, it'd be too intense. So I just use a very fine liner pen here, which is a 0.2. You can see there. That's what I use to draw the panel line on the wing. I don't just leave it like that. I'm going to do some more work on that to emphasize it. But I just draw the panel lines on the wing here, or on the fuselage, wherever I'm working there. And as I say, just the main panel lines. Right, what other tools do I use? I said in my opening video that I'm not going to use an airbrush or spray guns. I'm not. The tools that I will be using, the fine liner black. I've also got some jelly fine liner pens as well in white. I've got charcoal pencils here, 3 colours. Got black, sepia, sanguine, which is like a light brown, and white. Why have I gone for these colours? Well, predominantly on this wing it's going to be the sepia and the sanguine colours that I want to use, because they would represent weathering through, maybe a bit of rust and so on coming through on the surface. Black is very harsh and gives an immediate impact, but possibly too much, and I'll show in a moment what I mean on this panel, or the panel lines here. Obviously things like rulers are important, and a flexible ruler is very important, because if you're drawing panel lines across an airfoil section, you want to be able to bend the ruler over that. If you've got a stiff ruler, you won't be able to bend it, and it's difficult to do the lines. Another very useful tool, post-its here, and you'll see me use those in a moment. One of the most important tools from what I've shown so far is your finger, or fingers, because you can smudge colours into the surface to great effect. And what I'm going to do is just quickly show you what I mean by going across to the other wing here, where I've done some work already, and you can see the same, started off the same panel lines as here, but I've emphasized these now with a bit of smudging. You can see here dirtying down there, just gives it more of a bit of a 3D look to it. And without being dark black on these, I've used that sepia colour to give it some shading, give it some depth, and it's more subtle. But you'll also see that here there's some muck on the wing going down, dirt on the wing, and that is done just with rubbing my finger along there in the charcoal and rubbing it on the wing. The same here. You can see the same effect here, and that's done with rubbing my finger down there. Okay, Well, let's have a look and see what I mean about overdoing it with black all the time. Let's get my black charcoal pencil, and I'm just going to put a line here on top of the panel line that I've drawn. So there, I've just put you see there, that line there. Now if I now smudge that, I'm getting the effect, but you see that's really deep and intense, and that's too bold. If I look at that, it's subtle. That isn't so much, so I don't really want that. Now the great thing with charcoal is you can wash it off. So I've just got a damp cloth there, wash that off and just dry that. So back to where I was. Now this time I'm going to use the sepia to do exactly the same thing, just marking on there, finger, there, and it's not so intense, so it's a lot better in my book. So let's just look at that again, just wash that off, dry it, and getting my sepia pencil. Now you notice that I've not used whilst these panel lines were drawn with the ruler, I'm not going again with the ruler with the charcoal. It doesn't matter, because it's not going to be a distinct line that I'm doing. I just want to get that tone there. So let's just put it in there, go across the line to here, do this line here as well, here, and I'm going to use another tool now. I said you can use your finger, yes, but the other thing you can use is what's called a dry brush. See, it says dry on it, and it's a fairly stiff bristle on it, and it's for dry brushing, dry paint. I think I mentioned it in a previous video. The idea with that is you put the least amount of paint on the brush, and then you don't think you've got any paint on there, and then you go over the surface of whatever it is you want to do, and it puts a very light coating of paint on. So I'm going to use it in a similar way here, but this time I'm just going to rub along that line there, like so, because what this does, it gets that charcoal and it softens it out. Then I can use my finger and go over that again. And you notice when I'm rubbing it here, there, again, that's not as intense as the black. Okay, let's just wash that off. So you find a happy balance of what you want, the amount you want to put on to the surface. It's up to you. There is no right or wrong, it's whatever looks good to you. So let's do it for real this time. So I'm just going to apply a lighter amount here. Like that. And if I want more, I can put that in there. and increase it. Come down on the vertical one here. A nice smudge on that one there. This one here. Maybe continue that down on this vertical line. And what it happens is that the pen mark that I put in there for the panel line to start with, that's still there. And that's giving me a bit of an edge to the panel line. So I don't lose the definition of that panel line. And all this chalk pencil is doing is it's giving me some definition to it. There, and it looks dirty, it looks weathered. That's what we're trying to do. Come on to the green here. Maybe a bit more in there. A bit more on there. Now, I said about fingers, being able to use the fingers to do to make things dirty. Well, my fingers now are picking up that colour, so literally I can go and rub that on the surface here, and that's starting to give it a bit of a mottled effect to it. So it's not a bland monocolour. I mean, that's the bit of the wing that's going to go in the fuselage. You see there, that's what it's like, painted without any discoloration whatsoever. But you now start to look at it here and it's getting a bit of a mottledy look to it. Now, to accentuate the panel lines, what we can do is use our white gel pen, and I'll use a 0.8. And what this is doing is that's just picking up some of the panel line. Doesn't need to be much. And this is just giving it a, you know, like as though it's catching the light. Doesn't have to be a lot. Just lightly go over it. So now, let's just turn that round. So you can see here, hopefully you can see the panel line, bits of white in it. I'm going to go over this again a bit later with some silver to highlight those panel lines as well, as though it's been rubbed away with the sand. Right, now moving on to shading. Obviously that's some form of shading there with the white in there, but we can give the impression of like 3D really. If you look at the aileron here, they're fabric covered. In fact, I just realised I've made a mistake. They're fabric covered. So therefore they would have rib tape, and what I forgot to do when I was building the plane and covering it, I should have put a thin strip of brown paper on first of all and then covered it, and that will have raised these areas here when, if you can imagine it, the top of the rib appears. So that would give it a slight starving horse look to it, and that's what we're trying to replicate here, or that's what I've tried to replicate there. And this is where, let's turn this round, and I got carried away because it doesn't follow through to the flap. The flaps weren't fabric coloured, they're metal, so I've got to get rid of that. It's not a problem. I'll finish that off later. There were markings on them, but they certainly weren't ribs there. It looks all right. Right, how do I do the ailerons? This is where this comes in. The good old post-it. So what you do is you're going to be using white, and in my case the sepia. In fact, I'll do it on this here, even though I know it said it didn't, but then you can see the effect. Let's just dry that. Right, so what I want is I want one colour this side and a lighter colour this side to give a three-dimensional look to it. So I just put my post-it on there. On where one of those ribs is going to be. Let's assume this is going to have a rib on here. Yeah, a rib that we can see. Let's do it on the lighter brown colour there. I rub my, let's just zoom that in. Right, so I'm just going to rub the pencil onto the post-it, and then using my finger I'm just rubbing that off the post-it onto the surface, and you'll see there I've got there that line showing with a colour on it one side, because that's where the post-it was. So I now do the same on the other side of that with the white. Again, you don't have to be over the top with this. Let's move that across a bit. You can't see it. I'll move the camera. There we go. And just a circular movement there, and now you can see there you've got the distinction between the brown on the one side, or the dark on the one side, and the light on the other side there. And that's what I've done for these here. So it gives the impression of like that starving horse situation. So hopefully you get the general idea. Just wipe that off. And I'm going to have to wipe off this side as well, because I got carried away with doing my starving horse impression with the flaps. But like I say, I'm going to leave some of that, because if you look at the drawing, the line drawing of the Focke-Wulf wing here, you can see, he says, where's my pencil? Oh, there it is there. You can see here that there were lines down there. There's the aileron, obviously, and here it did have some distinctive shape there. So that's a subtle look to that. I'm happy with that. That can stay as it is. But there you'll see, by giving it the dark one side, light one side, it gives it the impression of three-dimensional feel to it. I mentioned a little while ago about the silver, that I use the silver. Well, this is what it is. It's called Rub and Buff. There, and it's like a paste there, used for, I think, jewellery and things like that. So all I'm going to do here, I'm going to be sparing with this because you can really get a bit carried away. So if I look at this part of the wing, so I want to replicate or emphasize the fact this has got worn sand, worn away to the underlying surface underneath the aluminium. So I'm just going to just put the brush along there, and you'll see, if I bring there, you'll see there, that's what it can do. Highlighting on the leading edge there, you'll see, and I've also put some on the surface, so when I move that, you'll see it shine as though that's worn away to the underlying aluminium on that. Again, if you're going to use this, use it sparingly. A little is better, and you can use a cocktail stick, and with a cocktail stick dipped in there, just run it down some of the panel lines. Well, hopefully that's given you some tips and some ideas about what to do and how to do it. It's very much a question of really grabbing the bull by the horns and doing some of this and just seeing what it looks like. Using these very basic materials, the beauty is that it washes off, or can wash off. So finally, for this video, I'm going to do something I haven't done yet, which is put the wing in its state at the moment onto the fuselage and have a look at it and see what it looks like, because I'll be honest with you, I haven't got a clue. So I haven't done the underside of the wing yet. That's still to be done. Let's just make sure those cables are in there. Push the wing on. I won't bother to bolt in. Let's just go to wide and up a bit and see what she looks like. I hope to goodness it does look. And the canopy, cockpit canopy, which has got the screw markings on it. I'll just place that in position roughly here, and gives me a look-see of the model. And I thought, well, I'll come with the handheld camera and let's have a look now to see it in all of its glory. Hey, just look at my workbench. All the tools for painting and goodness knows what else. Terrible. Let's look at the canopy in place. I've actually given this a coat of varnish, satin varnish, to see what it comes up with. So this is the colour that this will go down to. So, and this wing here was picking up the silver nicely on that. and you'll see obviously also the swastika that I've done on the rear of the fin. Yeah, it's taking shape quite nicely. Yeah, I'm pleased with that. And once I do the same that I've done on the wing to the fuselage, these areas here, I've also got to do the discolouring of the fuselage here for the exhaust coming through. The silver is really going to come to its own round the cowl ring there. I've got the yellow to paint underneath here. It's got to be yellow, but we're getting there, and I think tomorrow should see me break the back of most of it. I've got to put my crosses on here and my squadron marking as well on that, and yeah, good. Well guys, there you have it. That's the video on the detail of panel lines and weathering. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully it's inspired you to do your own thing, and really that's what it's all about. As I said in the video, during the video, give it a go, especially if you're using the same sort of materials that I've been using, the charcoal pencils for instance, because they just wash off. So if you make a right horlicks of it, you can just wash it off and start again. But anyway, as I say, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Please like the video, put any comments down below and I'll respond to it. And on to the next one.